All right. Ready to dive into a feeling we all know, but maybe don't always love talking about. Jealousy. We're going deep into Esther Perel's The State of Affairs. That's Rethinking Infidelity. And wow, some of her ideas really got me thinking differently about this whole, green-eyed monster thing.
It's so interesting how she kind of exposes the contradictions around jealousy. Like on one hand, it's everywhere in classic literature, right?
Oh, yeah.
But then in modern therapy, at least in the West, it's almost like we're tiptoeing around it.
It's true. Like we're trying to rationalize it away instead of just confronting its power.
Exactly. It's like
Yeah.
it's everywhere in Shakespeare, Proust, even Ovid. Like these literary giants weren't shy about, getting into the messiness of jealousy.
Not at all. But then in therapy, it's a lot about processing the hurt from the betrayal, not always examining the jealousy itself.
And Perel argues that this discomfort with jealousy, it's really cultural. She highlights how in some cultures, like parts of Latin America, jealousy is almost like a given in romantic love.
Right, right.
It's seen as this sign of passion, like you're protecting what's yours.
Yeah, she tells that story, the one about the woman in Buenos Aires, and she can't even imagine prioritizing lying over expressing jealousy.
Oh, yeah, that one.
She basically says, lying, that's just part of life, but jealousy, that's real, raw emotion.
It's such a different perspective, right?
Totally. Especially compared to that American guy on the plane she talks about, remember? Hiding his jealousy because he doesn't want to seem weak.
Yeah, those little stories really make her point come alive, Like cultural norms really shape how we experience and express jealousy.
Yeah.
Like in the U.S., we're all about individual freedom, right? So jealousy can feel threatening to that.
Makes sense.
But in more collectivist cultures, where it's about group harmony and interdependence,
Right.
jealousy might be more accepted, even expected, as a way of maintaining those bonds.
So is it fair to say that maybe by trying to suppress jealousy, we're actually missing out on some valuable information about ourselves, our relationships, I mean?
That's exactly what Pearl's getting at.
Interesting.
She argues that by acknowledging and exploring our jealousy, we can actually understand our needs better, our fears, how strong our attachments are.
Like she's saying, don't run from the green-eyed monster, learn to dance with it or something.
I love that. Exactly.
It's like reframing it, right? From a negative emotion to a potential source of insight.
Yes.
And she uses this British couple, Polly and Nigel, to show how this plays out in a relationship.
Okay.
So Nigel has an affair, and Polly is totally consumed by thoughts of the other woman, Clarissa.
Right.
But she tries to frame her jealousy as trauma, almost like it's wrong of her to feel it so strongly.
And that's where Perel really challenges the usual narrative. She's like, hold on, Polly's jealousy is totally normal. It actually shows how much she loves Nigel.
Like the flip side of that love.
Exactly. The fear of losing something precious.
And this is where it gets interesting for me, because Polly wants Nigel to tell Clarissa he doesn't love her, that it was just a meaningless fling. But when you think about it,
Yeah.
that's like the ultimate possessiveness, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's that paradox at the heart of jealousy, wanting to control not just your partner's actions,
Right.
but their feelings too.
Like we want to own their whole emotional experience.
It's a lot.
But then there's this twist, right? Polly admits that imagining Nigel with Clarissa actually turns her on.
Whoa, okay.
So how do we even unpack that?
Well, this is where Perel brings up the erotic charge of jealousy.
Okay.
She's saying that longing and the fear of loss can actually fuel desire.
It's like that forbidden fruit thing.
Exactly. Suddenly it's irresistible.
So in a way, Nigel's affair accidentally brought some excitement back into their relationship.
In this case, it seems like it.
Wow.
But Pearl's careful to say this isn't always true.
Yeah.
Sometimes the details of an affair are just too painful
Too much.
to be eroticized. Yeah.
Like in that movie Closer.
Yes. Exactly.
Where the husband's constantly grilling his wife about the affair and it just pushes them further apart.
It's a good reminder that jealousy can be really powerful and unpredictable.
For sure.
It can reignite passion, or it can lead to really bad
It's
consequences.
a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Definitely.
So it seems like with jealousy, it's about finding that balance, right? Like acknowledging its power, but not letting it totally run the show.
Yeah, that's a great point.
But isn't there also this danger of mixing up jealousy with envy? Aren't they kind of similar?
You're hitting on something really important there.
Okay.
Perel is very clear about the difference.
Okay.
She says jealousy, it's rooted in that fear of losing something you already have.
Right.
But envy, that comes from wanting something you don't.
So jealousy is about protecting what's yours.
Yeah, exactly.
And envy is more like coveting what someone else has.
Precisely.
Okay.
And to show this, she brings in Morgan, whose husband is also having an affair.
Okay.
But unlike Polly, Morgan's experience, it goes beyond just the betrayal. She gets fixated on the other woman, like obsessed with her looks, her accomplishments, even how happy she seems.
So it's like Morgan's hurting on two levels then.
Yeah.
She's dealing with the betrayal.
Right.
But also feeling like she's not good enough.
Exactly. Like she doesn't measure up.
Almost like projecting her own insecurities onto the other woman.
That's a great way to put it.
And that mix of jealousy and envy, that can get pretty messy, can't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Comparisons, self-sabotage.
It can be really damaging.
Makes you wonder if jealousy is something we can ever really overcome, you know? Is it just wired into our brains, or can we learn to move past it?
That's a question that's been around forever.
I bet.
And Perel looks at it from both sides, the evolutionary and the developmental perspectives.
So on one hand, there are those who say jealousy is like this primal instinct.
Right. Built in for survival.
Makes sense.
Like from an evolutionary view, jealousy is about protecting your ability to reproduce. For men, it's about making sure their kids are actually theirs, and not wasting resources on someone else's offspring.
Yeah.
And for women, it's about keeping that partner around.
To help raise the kids.
Exactly.
But then there's the developmental side, right? Where they say jealousy comes later in childhood.
Right. And that it's shaped by our experiences, our culture.
So it's less about instinct and more about what we learn about love, relationships, all that.
Exactly.
Perel also talks about jealousy in same-sex relationships, which is interesting.
Oh, yeah. That research is fascinating.
Because it kind of challenges those traditional evolutionary ideas, doesn't it?
It does. Studies have shown that lesbian women, they tend to express more sexual jealousy, while gay men report more emotional jealousy.
So it's not as simple as men just caring about physical cheating and women about emotional cheating.
Not at all. It's way more complicated than that.
It sounds like jealousy is this big mix of things.
It is. Your personal history, your attachment style, culture, and the specific dynamics of your relationship, it all plays a role.
Wow. Okay, so much to unpack there.
Right. And then she gets into jealousy in polyamorous relationships, where people are open about having multiple partners.
And that's where that compersion thing comes in, right?
Yeah, that idea of feeling happy for your partner when they're happy in their other relationships.
Which is such a different way of looking at things compared to traditional monogamy, isn't it?
Totally.
But even in polyamorous relationships, jealousy still pops up sometimes, right?
It does, which just shows you how complex human emotions are.
Yeah, like even when you try to redefine those boundaries,
Exactly.
those feelings of insecurity, possessiveness, they can still creep in.
It happens. It reminds us that even with the best intentions, you can't always erase those deep-seated feelings completely.
It's human nature, I guess.
Right. And the important thing is how we deal with those feelings, whether we're monogamous or not.
Speaking of dealing with those feelings, I'm curious about how Perel approaches jealousy in therapy.
Okay, yeah.
Remember Polly trying to push away those thoughts about Nigel's affair? Perel actually has a different approach, instead of just trying to make those thoughts go away.
She actually encourages Polly to explore them, to really lean into them without judgment.
So instead of shutting down those feelings, she's saying face them head on.
Exactly. She even suggests Polly create an altar to Clarissa, the other woman.
Whoa, really?
As a way of acknowledging the role she played, in shaking things up and reawakening Polly's own desire for Nigel.
That's a powerful image.
It is.
It's like she's saying, own your experience, don't be a victim.
I think that's exactly it.
But wouldn't that risk making the affair seem okay or downplaying the hurt it caused?
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
But I think Pearl's not condoning the affair at all.
Okay.
It's more about helping Polly process her emotions in a way that empowers her.
Instead of getting stuck in resentment.
Exactly.
It sounds like she's advocating for a more nuanced view of jealousy,
I agree.
recognizing that it can be destructive but also transformative.
Exactly. And realizing that how we respond to those feelings, that's what determines whether they tear us apart or bring us closer.
It's pretty wild how she takes this idea, the altar to the other woman and turns it into something empowering.
I know, right?
Instead of just saying, ignore those jealous feelings, she's like, lean in.
Totally. It fits with a lot of her work, actually.
But yeah.
This idea that trying to completely erase jealousy, it might not even be possible or even, something we should aim for.
So you're saying there's actually something good about experiencing jealousy, even when it hurts.
Curl seems to think so.
Interesting.
She argues that jealousy, like at its core, it's an expression of caring, really deep caring.
Ah,
It's that gut reaction when we think we might lose something that means the world to us.
like a wake-up call.
It
Like,
really matters.
yeah, and while the possessive controlling side of jealousy can be bad, there's also this vulnerability to it, this
Right.
willingness to show our partner our deepest fears, like saying, I'm terrified of losing you.
Yeah, and when our partner meets that with empathy,
Understanding.
it can actually make the relationship stronger,
Hmm.
open up deeper conversations, more intimacy. You start to appreciate the relationship even more.
So it's not about pretending jealousy isn't there. It's about learning to deal with it in a healthy way.
Exactly.
Together and on our own.
Right, so what can we actually do?
Yeah, what are some concrete steps?
Perel says the first thing is just acknowledging the feeling
Okay.
without judgment.
So instead of beating ourselves up for feeling jealous,
Yeah.
we try to understand what it's telling us.
Exactly. Like what triggers it?
Yeah.
What needs or fears are coming up?
And once you know that, then you can talk to your partner about it, right?
Right, but how do you do that without turning it into a blame game?
Yeah, that's the tricky part, isn't it?
It is. But the key is to focus on your own feelings, not trying to control your partner. So instead of saying you can't talk to them anymore, it's more like, when you spend a lot of time with them, I feel insecure. Can we talk about it?
It's a different approach, for sure.
It is. It's about being vulnerable, trying to understand each other.
Not about pointing fingers.
Right. And remembering that jealousy, it can actually help us grow.
If we let it.
Exactly. Both individually and as a couple.
This whole deep dive has really changed how I think about jealousy.
Yeah.
I used to think it was just bad, something to avoid completely.
It's easy to think that.
But now I see it differently.
That's great. I think a lot of people feel that way after reading Perel's work.
She really makes you reconsider things.
She does.
So next time you're dealing with those jealous feelings, remember this conversation, Ray Day.
Absolutely.
Remember, it's complicated. It's about vulnerability.
And there's potential for growth there.
Maybe that green-eyed monster is trying to tell you something important about yourself, about your relationship.
It might be.
Thanks for diving in with me.
Of course,